Welcome to Conversations Matter. I'm Hans Hickler.
And I'm Molly Bergholm.
Molly and I are big fans of having real, deep conversations. So sit back, relax, be present, and really enjoy this one. We're sitting down today with Rony Abovitz, founder and CEO of Magic Leap. Magic Leap is the pioneer of spatial computing, a technology platform that amplifies human ability by enabling the physical and the digital worlds to become one. With their wearable spatial computer, the Magic Leap 1, we can finally experience and interact with intelligent digital content in the world around us, completely free from screens. Magic Leap is looking to define the next era of communication, collaboration, learning, and entertainment. Molly, it blows me away every time I use these glasses. I was in Sao Paulo the other day, and I put these glasses on, and the next thing I know, the wall is like this big undersea cavern, and sharks and stingrays are swimming out at me, and I'm like interacting them with my fingers. Totally blew me away.
So cool, right?
Yeah.
Can't wait for this.
So, hello.
Hi.
Always enjoy your company, and I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Thanks
Molly
for having me on.
Thank you for being here.
And we're going to have a good conversation. I'm going to dive right in. I happen to know that community matters a lot to you, and you're very active here in Miami. You brought Magic Leap here to Miami. You're very involved with your alma mater here. Tell me a little bit where that comes from.
A few things. One, I do like going against the grain. So I did my first startup while I was in graduate school at the University of Miami. And at that time, Miami did not really have a climate that was conducive to starting up tech companies,
right,
which made me more motivated to try to do it anyway. A lot of folks are like, why aren't you moving out to the West Coast or something? And that just made me more determined to climb a steeper wall here. And I always felt like I moved to South Florida from Cleveland, Ohio when I was a kid. And it just felt like Florida was a blank piece of paper, Disney built Disney World here. There was nobody telling him what he could or couldn't do. We went to the moon, in Cape Canaveral. So there's all these amazing things that happened here that people kind of forget. So like totally, world-changing sort of things. And
Beyond orange groves.
Yeah, so there's alligators in the ocean and the Keys, but there's sort of like this like secret underbelly of Florida that has, hey, we did world first things here. So I figured I'd rather be on an outlier place than following everyone else.
Are you glad you did?
I am, because I think it's interesting, and being here and doing a few startups here allows you to find who you are and not just copy a whole social pattern around you, but to find your own way.
Well, you've done a lot. I remember meeting you in 2013
Yep.
when you were just starting up with Magic Leap. And I think there were like maybe 40 or 50 people here over at the Dakota Center there. Now you've got this pretty amazing thing going on.
It's growing up.
Yeah.
It started out as a late night idea in my garage at home. And, I'd work at Mako Surgical by day, at night dream up what I'm going to do next. And then at some point my wife's like, you need to go to sleep because I'd work all day long on surgical robotics. And then I was working with a group of New Zealanders in Wellington, New Zealand, a guy named Sir Richard Taylor, who was working on Avatar, and they did Lord of the Rings before that, and The Hobbit. And, so my late night was their morning, so it worked really well. I'd go to bed and they would have stuff ready for the morning when I woke up. But there was this overlap, which is going late into night, where we would work together. So it made perfect sense, because I could do my late night stuff with them, and they're in the other part of the world, happening in Florida. So even though it was in Florida, I was finding collaborators on the other side of the earth too, which is kind of cool. And being so far away, they also had that sort of nobody told them what to do. They could find their own way, even more than Florida. It's like the next stop over there is the South Pole. So we're kind of like kindred spirits.
That was fun to see evolve, though, because I remember when I first started with you, there'd be these posters of the game that they were creating, and and we had these like demo things, and you talk about it, and here we are years later, and then the game's launched, and it's just fantastic. So
it's real.
Yeah, tell me, spatial computing. What is that? I mean, when I explain Magic Leap, I talk about augmented reality. I said, I talk about this world where the world you're living in gets introduced to anything else and integrated with that. But when I see your tweets, when I see how you talk about Magic Leap, you talk about this spatial design. What is that?
So, because we're doing a podcast, I can get all metaphysical with you guys.
Please
do. We like that.
So, the first spatial computer is actually the universe. If you think it's this massive sentient thing that has physics and algorithms, and it's sort of was there and it's all over the place, but it is spatial. It's a space-time energy computer, and then we evolved into that. We are it, but we're also evolved into it. So if you think about what we are, the human brain is a biologic spatial computer. We sense in space. We get visual input from light fields. We get spatial input from sound field. We get force input all over in space, through interacting with atoms. Magic Leap doesn't do atoms yet. We do mostly photons. Mm-hmm. You get chemical input from all around in space through taste and smell, and like you get like all these subtle sort of things. So we're a spatial computer. The universe is spatial computing, but computers are not. There are these weird abstract mathematical constructs that are just kind of not quite of the world. And I thought the future computing would be to not fight the way the world is, but to blend it into the world. So what Magic Leap really is trying to be is not disrupt the balance between our biologic spatial computing brain and the spatial computer that's the universe, but to help link all this digital computing world that we've created, which we access through really weird flat things, and just make that part of the universe, so that all the information in your phone or computer or wherever, it's liberated, and you see and experience it through your brain the way you see and experience the actual physical universe. So the informational, data, digital experiential universe is like blended with the actual universe. Now that is not what gets you funded. Right. That's really what Magic Leap is doing.
Is that what matters to you about Magic Leap?
Yeah, we're making that happen. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable that that's really happening. Mm-hmm. And most people don't know that's really what we're doing. We built a factory to create optics that begin to tap in. We're sending like a digital signal to tap into your visual cortex, because the visual cortex is the display. My thought on the next computer is like if the universe the display. And I had a friend who's a theoretical physicist who went to Caltech. He dropped out to become a guitar player in a band, and then he went on meanderings around the world. So sort of like a really brilliant, intelligent beatnik kind of guy. And the two of us had these big debates about kind of like late night diner things where you're like, you're discussing like, oh, you can fit the whole world into an atom, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing was like, is the universe out there or is it in here? Yes. We had this insight that what's out there is actually in here. Like the entire construct we experience is not external. There is an external universe, but if you walked outside your brain, you wouldn't recognize it. So our brain, which is really a sensory input spatial computer, throws away tons of input. It throws almost all of it away, and that your visual cortex reconstructs a model of that universe that's inside your head. Your visual cortex is like where you sit. It's where your consciousness sits. And it's based on all this incoming input from the physics of the real universe, which you never see directly. Your eyes filter out a bunch of information. Your visual cortex has this model of the world that we've inherited from like many generations of our ancestors, and then like insects and whatever was there at the very beginning. There's a model that allowed them to survive and propagate. And that is in our brain, and that actually creates the world we think is external. But everything we think is external is actually visualized internally. So we realized to get the outside universe, we had to tap internally. It was a bit Matrix-like. And it turns out one of the guys that won an Academy Award for the Matrix works at Magic Leap now. But anyway, so the notion of the visual cortex as that display, as our access point into what we perceive as the full external spatial universe, was like, wow, how do we get into that? And then I was doing computer-assisted surgery. It's like, well, we're going to stick a probe in there. That sounds horrible, and that's all. That's like let's not do that. Yeah. And then we had this approach, which we called like gently knocking on the front door. So we started to think that the retina is a keyboard that lets you tap on the visual cortex. And if you could do that, you could, and if you send signals that the retina was used to getting, which is like how the universe sends signals to us through light fields, like when we replicate that or emulate that in some way, we would get in. Like could we hack our way in there? And that's kind of what Magic Leap is really doing.
I see that, and Molly and I were having a conversation before. She got a quick demo before today. Ryan was down there, and so when I experienced Tonandi the first time, what you were saying when you were talking about that, that's what I was thinking. This idea that you can touch and you can feel it you can feel the electricity in your fingertips. So you're touching something that is virtual with your real hand, and your brain is reacting to it. It was just mind blowing.
We had a high-level Tibetan Buddhist monk visit us, and we put him on Tonandi, and he's like, "How did you guys do that? And how did you get there so fast?" That's what we do.
Well,
it was very interesting because it was like, because I explained to him what the theory of what we're building. He's like, we just get there in a different way. It was very kind of like your hair stands up.
Ask Rony your reality question that you were telling me at Starbucks before this.
Yeah, it was interesting because just to lead into it, when I was just trying it for the first time, which by the way, I don't own a television, an iPad, I don't play video games. I have no.
It took me 5 minutes for her to understand what the trigger on the device was.
If you want to test it on someone who has like no orientation towards this, I would be a good candidate. But when I saw the world pop up and Hans was describing, okay, you can make that wall explode and feel what's in. I said, well, yeah, we can do that in meditation. I'll just feel my way into it. It's these worlds in meditation, they start to unfold in whole different ways. And we start to realize that the solidity of the world is not so solid. But it's a different way in, and it takes many, many years of
You should experience Tonandi. What I mean by that is Tonandi's not the same thing for everybody. And the best way to experience Tonandi is like to go like in the late afternoon, go to like a forest, because what it does is it maps itself to the environment, and just sit there quietly for an hour, don't let anyone be around, and suddenly these sound spirits will appear, and they have intelligence, and they react to you, and they'll flow in and out of you, and you'll be like, and by the way, people who have your brain plus our system equals the experience. So some people have very heightened creative brains, and they're explaining things to me that I'm like, we did not do that. But it shows that like our tech and the brain are working so hand in hand. And other people come in, it's like, I don't know what it was. And you're like, you might be missing a very large part of your brain, or you have no creative visual center at all. And to them, it's just nothing. It's kind of interesting because like we're not filling the whole picture. We're doing part of the picture. And your brain and your visual cortex and your imagination literally does add things. Like the signal we send in and your output, you output much higher resolution than what we send in. You do things that our system is not doing because our computer is part our device and a big part the 100 trillion neural connections in your brain. Those two together, like our best computer is those two. And what I told our early investors, like the human brain is a coprocessor. Or we're really a coprocessor of that brain.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I said we're almost like a training ground for like Harry Potter kids in 50 years. Like they'll be doing what we're doing without Magic Leap. Like Magic Leap is like training wheels to show you have the best computer already. That's also not a good investor pitch, but I think that's true. All we're doing is unlocking things people probably already have.
I was in Brazil and I showed Tonandi to a businessman, and he had his marketing person with him, and he was doing it, and his reaction was, wow, that's cool. Somewhat of an underwhelming reaction because I sort of teed it up and said, you're going to love this. His marketing person was on, I swear to God, Rony, she had tears in her eyes. She was like, I think it's like you said, you're relating to it, right?
Her brain,
yeah, she was like overwhelmed, and she wouldn't stop. She like, my 5 minutos, give me 5 more minutes. She was like,
something was happening.
Something was happening. It was really cool.
Well, it's interesting because and when we think of how this could impact humanity, so a lot of my work has been with the special operations and the U.S. military. And what I do is come in and work with special operators before they go into combat. And we work with guided meditation to take them through an experience and to prepare them for what they're going to experience. And then we do recordings, so when they go in, they're ready. And then when they come out, one of the things we've learned about trauma is that if you unpackage things right away, you have a greater chance of it not creating the deeper patterns that really create post-traumatic stress disorder. And so when I was researching for this experience today, I was having this feeling like that's what I'm doing with guided meditation. I'm taking people through. But what's interesting is the two portals in is what you're just describing. If I want to go in and affect someone's performance by doing it in the brain, and if I want to unpack it after they experience something, there's two ways in that we can change them. One is through going in and working with that which is changing. And in Sanskrit, we'd say like the prakriti, the universe, the part that's changing. And then the other part is the purusha, that part is unchanging. So if we can tap people into that part of themselves that's unchanging, they have a center of gravity where they can experience it. So that's one part of how could this affect that which is unchanging, but then also how can we use that? Like I could totally see pairing a guided meditation with some of the mixed reality experiences where they're able to actually work their way through the operation they're about to do, or vice versa. Once they're finished, take the actual imagery from what they did and pair that with guided meditations and say, okay, what's present in your body now? And a lot of the biometrics could feed into it as well. So you could really see like, where did you lose your peace? Where did you start to get stressed? Where did the team lose their peace? Where were you awesome? Like what made it awesome? Like all of that feeds into it. So I'm curious what you have to say about that.
I think you're completely right. And I probably can't talk about any of the other stuff we might be doing there.
Okay.
But the part I could talk about is, yes, you're right. And if you think about the brain, whether it's for that kind of person or let's say let's use an athlete because it's a very similar kind of performance issue. If you are, your brain has like this world building function. You have incoming inputs, and we're doing it right now. Like you have this world, but then you have your imagination, which is not directly wired into the same thing. You have this like world building function, and you have an imagination function. And the imagination function, like the great artists, they have to like externalize it. You draw, you write a novel. They close their eyes, they can imagine a world. Yeah. But those are not wired together. Because if they're wired together, your imagination just run wild and insert all sorts of stuff into, the world zero, the way we operate every day. You couldn't function if your imagination was just pouring constantly into the thing that lets us operate every day. It's probably an evolutionary thing, because if you were doing it all the time, you just couldn't function. But when you think about like people with psychiatric disorders, it's probably those things are wired in such a way that
it's coming in.
Open up your eyes. There's a world zero. Allows you to operate, survive, propagate, do normal things. And then you close your eyes. You have peace, and you could sort of imagine be an artist. Like the brain has set that up as separate. What's interesting about Magic Leap is you can now create something, and that imaginary world can, in a gentle way, be part of your world zero. And then you could turn it off. So it's like the way we would make a painting. We were trying to imagine things in our head. Like Tolkien would write a book and he would see this whole world. When you meditate, you can imagine a world. James Cameron imagined Avatar. But you have to go through all this effort to world build Avatar. You just open your eyes and your brain instantly world builds this world. So the thing that I always found interesting is like you have better than Avatar world building capability built into every human being because you use it every day. But our imagination separated from it. Yeah. So it's the best canvas, though. The canvas that we have is an amazing world-building engine. So I think some of the folks in the company who are on the creative team, they think like when you meditate or when you imagine, you are entering a world-building capability. There's a famous quarterback, I can't say who, that literally does what you described for the special forces. He's like watched all the films more than any other quarterback on the planet, and then like simulates in his imagination function everything that's going to happen. He's seen every play, he's done everything, and then when he's on the field, he's like, I've already seen that, I've already experienced all that. He can actually create experiences through his imagination as if he's really been there. Without too much detail, we have done some things like that, and it's so powerful because you have that experiential, oh, I've been there, that's happened, I have a memory of that, I've done that 50 times, so you're not afraid of it when it comes for the first time.
You actually have that muscle memory and that experience of what it's like.
Just a quick shout out to our amazing sponsor, the Great Courses Plus. We are so grateful to have the Great Courses Plus as our sponsor. They're a streaming service of incredible content, lectures and courses on anything you can imagine, hobbies, history, you name it, just incredible. And in these times we're recording now with coronavirus, what a better way to get introduced to this product. Molly, you've got some courses on here. Tell us about finding meaning in adversity, building your resilience.
So Building Your Resilience is a course that was really made for these times. It's a 24-class series where we share philosophies to do things like manage your emotions, deal with relationships that can be trying, work with stress directly through things like breathing practices, yoga, meditation, yoga nidra. So it's really perfect for right now. It's half lectures and half practice classes. So you get the whole thing.
Wow. I know you charge a lot of money for those things when you go out on the road. So for our listeners to get that online, it's amazing. I'm working on becoming a sommelier. I'm learning about wine tasting through a Great Courses Plus lecture. So all kinds of great stuff. And the amazing thing is that our listeners are going to get a free month for the entire content of the Great Courses Plus library. A free month. All you have to do, listeners, is go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/Molly. So one word, The Great Courses Plus, write out the word plus.com/Molly, MOLLY. And sign up, and you've got access to this incredible library.
We were talking at Starbucks about, in meditation, sort of reality is when you almost simplify everything to the core, right? You shed everything else, and being present is reality. And Molly was saying, okay, explain this augmented reality thing to me, because in my world, I'm not trying to augment, I'm paraphrasing, but it's about the purest form of reality is to really get self-awareness. So, here we are, using our iPhones 15 hours a day and all this, social media and stuff like that. And, we have these conversations about, sometimes it's back to the basics is where the true reality sits. How do you react to that?
Yeah. So I don't like the word augmented reality or mixed reality, because what we do is like the brain creates the reality you're experiencing. So there's I think neurologically true reality. Like I have a neurologically true reality of whatever inputs are coming in. I have this one way to experience it in my brain. That's what's happening. It is that thing. Whether it's a digital or physical blend, it is my one and only actual reality. Now, there's billions of people on the planet. They all have their slightly different realities. And then there may be the reality outside of us, which we don't ever get to directly experience. Like if you walked out of your head and looked at the universe, it would be like this completely thing you have no idea. But a lot more stuff, because we filter out everything. Our brain is only, with all the neurons we have, you can only intake a tiny, tiny fraction of what the universe has got out there. I think of it like sipping Niagara Falls through a coffee straw. But that's like understating how little actually dribbles into your brain. So our reality is like very filtered and very like we're inside an egg. And there's a much bigger reality we never get to directly experience. So to me, if you are sending signals into that eggshell, which is, your brain is inside that, the one reality, it's like my personal reality, you have a personal reality, and the sum total, all of those are like an ever-changing kind of thing. But there is probably a different reality that we're all not directly able to experience yet. Which is kind of interesting. So I don't like the augmented or mixed. It sort of separates, like there's something a part of my experiential reality. And Magic Leap's about there's the reality experiencing is that it's neurologically true right now. That's kind of what it is.
So how could your technology, like in meditation, with guided meditation, we can take people to the edge of the cliff, but and it seems like you've really
What
thought a
happens at
lot
the
about
cliff?
this. What happens at the cliff?
Yeah,
and
what's
how
the cliff
can
all about?
Well, how do
You're
you get
telling
them
an
into
entrepreneur,
stillness?
like, what's on the other
yeah,
side?
how do you get over the cliff?
What's the cliff?
The cliff being the cessation of the thinking mind, where the thoughts thin out and you can experience that which is unchanging before the Big Bang, before creation.
And do you come back from that, or
Of course.
you can go past the cliff?
Molly goes there every morning at 6:15.
So you can go to the cliff and hang out. Is it like a Nemo? He goes past on the reef. I don't know if you ever saw Finding Nemo, but he swims about. And there's like the big ocean. He runs back again. He's not allowed out there. His dad's like, don't go there. And
well, it's holding us always. It's here now. It's just that we identify more with the changing reality than with the stillness of that which is unchanging. But in meditation, it's not like you go to get it. It comes and gets you. You create the conditions for it to occur, and then it occurs. But in guided meditation, I mean, I've taught in psychiatric units at the VA hospitals, and they can have experiences of total stillness. It's possible.
Explain to me you're guiding someone to
we guide them
this point of the cliff, and what do you kind of experience right past that?
So the cliff the cliff consists of all of our physical sensations, of our breath, of our mind, all the feelings, emotions, beliefs, all of the contents of the mind. And then the cliff, everything that keeps us in this waking reality, or that which is changing, are those things that arise and unfold and then dissolve. But where do they arise from? Where do they unfold on the back? What's the blank movie screen? And what's behind the screen? And so in guided meditation, we welcome like our full experience of what it is. And we take people to the edge, and then we just say, okay, right, if everything about you is being welcomed, there's nothing to push against, there's nothing to fix or change, then here, lie down in your true nature. And you do it every single night when you're in deep sleep. When you're in deep sleep, you experience your true nature. You're just not aware of it, or that which is unchanging, or consciousness, or awareness, or call it whatever you want, fill in the blank. But there's a part of you that is that deep sleep state that is that which is unchanging. And so in meditation, we cultivate that self-awareness where you're aware of that part of yourself. And so many of the things that keep people from experiencing it are not feeling safe. And I can see your technology being used when someone, let's say a veteran, comes up against their biggest fears. How could this be used to like calm them down in the moment, to remember like there's something here that's unchanging, or to help process the thoughts, to help them become self-aware of the thoughts of, oh, wow, I'm about to have a flashback, that you could use the biometrics that you all can feed into it eventually that all impacts it, to warn them, like you're headed towards the wrong cliff, the wrong direction. How can we come back to this, which is unchanging? And I could see it really. And again, I have no technology background, but I was excited about it. I feel like it could be used to take you to the edge of the cliff where you can experience
it totally
stillness.
can, because the funniest thing about what we're doing is that it's bringing it all back around to stuff that's probably thousands of years old. Yeah. Like the people that would probably most understand what we do are people that are meditation gurus, people that are shamans. They're tapping into something that for the first time in technology, we're turning it inward again. Mm-hmm. Like at some point we went outward, we were painting on walls, then we made photographs and movies, and everything was external. Where Magic Leap was actually pointing it back in at the thing we have that you keep reading about, different cultures. There's someone who already knows how to do that. One of the other things I think we're doing is we do point to people their wrong notions about what reality is. I brought someone and I said, I'm going to make you disappear. We're going to replace your head with something else. We're showing them the malleability of reality, which is like you have some understanding of the world, which is not correct. And like, by the way, this thing we're showing you is based on, this is what physics really is. This is how the neuroscience really is. And whatever notion you have is not really correct. So it does help wake people up to like, what is the nature of how your brain and physics really work? So, so some people see it as a piece of tech. Others have come here more enlightened, more progressive, and they're like, oh, like you're now showing me like this magic between the universe and the brain and all this endless stuff that's out there. And you do see, and those are the people that like cry and get it, and they just go off. Yeah. Others are sort of, they're not woke. Is that me? Yeah. Like, the more woke you are, the more cool and amazing Magic Leap is. But if you're unwoke, it's just like, oh, this is my phone or tablet kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you are more awake. That's interesting.
The lights are going on
Speaking
and
of
off
woke.
as we're talking about.
It's like we're talking about lights and light fields.
The
I guess the
visual.
room is kicking into gear. It's like
Yeah.
agreeing with me. But it is, by the way, that like there are a lot of like all along the way, and anyone who's heard the very beginning will tell you, like we had no idea what we were doing in the company. We were just like setting sail in that direction, and the universe will help us. And it truly was that. We'll go here, and then a raven will appear with a feather, and then you give it to that person. They give you a piece of corn. It's like, go up the mountain, and you meet the wizard who tells you the dragons are. I mean, it's literally been that kind of like Hobbit
You're on
type
the
adventure.
hero's
It's
journey.
true.
No, it has been this like,
And if you
and-
know Rony, he totally supports that. Right?
and I was like,
He's
the journey of this has been as fun because part of it was the company's called Magic Leap, right? So there's a notion of you have to have a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And it's you have a little bit of like leap of faith and magical thinking. We're like, what if you combine those two things? It's like, well, that's what startup people do. There's no reason to believe you're going to succeed. You just do it anyway.
That's so
and at the
awesome.
beginning of The Hobbit, Gandalf tells Bilbo, you're probably not going to make it back, okay? Please sign this form here, like in
Right.
case you're eaten by dragons. And then you could sit in your home and eat your, like scones and your tea. And we're going to go off over there and have these great adventures. You just don't know what's going to happen.
It's the creative Cortez burning his ships thing.
Yeah, and then you go like you take that step, and to me the magic leap is you do that. It's Columbus. It's the team that sat in that rocket, which had a very high percentage probability of exploding in Apollo
Yes.
11. They were not going to make it back alive. They all
Right.
knew that.
Every moment
What's
paired with its perfect
The greatest things
response.
we've ever done as people have been magic leaps.
Yeah. So what's with the astronaut?
To me, the period of time that I've seen just consistently the greatest amount of magic belief tied with science was like 62 to 69. Like if I studied that period a lot. I've met Gene Kranz, met different Apollo astronauts, and Sam, who was like Sam Miller, who was he's our head of systems. He was at NASA. He was like I was employee 0. He was employee number 1. And it was kind of like, I just felt like we were going to explore inner space. That was like one of our first things, like outer space. You could spend 5 years trying to get to some planet. You get there and it's like, oh my God, it's like living in an RV in a freezing Siberian desert. And like, now what? But inner space is infinitely more cool. The amount of neurons in your brain outpace the number of objects in the universe. So we're like, is the outer world interesting or is the inner world interesting? So Magic Leap, we thought of it was a rocket. We called it a rocket ship for the mind.
so
For
cool.
inner space exploration. We thought any planet could have cool aliens or anything. It had like
Yes.
infinite possibility you would get to much faster. And there's a great scene in The Right. You ever see The Right Stuff? Where John Glenn is orbiting, and there's these Aborigine shaman, looking at him going to space. And like, well, we do that all the time without your technology. So I convinced Sam and I were talking about like inner space travel was going to be the coolest thing. And probably the strangest thing we did was at the beginning, magically, they gave a TED Talk. Somebody gave a TED Talk wearing an astronaut suit. Probably was me. And the TED Talk was called I think it was like Creative Travels or Inner Space Travels of the Creative Astronaut or something. The idea that we were astronauts going the other way, and that inner space was way more interesting and infinitely cooler than outer space.
As meditators, we're astronauts going to inner space, right?
And this is such a powerful moment where we can really see it in all of this research. And what you're saying, I'm just so excited about it because
And I do think we're training wheels for that. Like,
Yeah.
in the same way that NASA astronauts needed to build a rocket to go travel somewhere, Aborigine shamans will say, we could just project ourselves to Mars anytime we want, like Dr. Manhattan. So there's kind of like the way you get there. Most people don't know how to do it. But the deeper we get into what we're building on the technology, I realize the brain is actually that amazing thing. Most of the amazing things we do at the company are simply tapping into stuff the brain's capable of doing. that you may or may not need our technology to do. Our technology helps people because we're in this part of humanity where we need tools and computers and things to like tell us what our brain can do.
We have these blinders that
So we externalize it. Other people realize that all those tools are already there.
Yeah.
So Magic Leap is a tool to help you like explore inner space, which is creativity and imagination, which is boundless.
How do you think about the responsibility that you have, sort of the value systems and the ethics of creating a technology like this?
It's insanely high. And we spend an inordinate amount a very abundant amount of time talking about morality and ethics and values at our company. And what's good about our period right now is we're in this like creator edition, like understanding things. We're in a learning mode. We're not in a high scale mode yet. It's like the Apple I era of where we are. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly important to understand it because what I used to tell early people joining was like, you are going into that space where someone is. Like there's no separation between what we do and that part of someone where their consciousness is. Like we are in there. That's like the inner sanctum, and we have to be very careful about what we do when we go there. The content, how we do it, the physiology. It's like, if we sort of take a med tech like approach on just the physiology, but then you have to take a philosophical approach about like what should be able to go in there. Because to some extent, as this stuff gets perfected, you are creating true memories and experiences. I mean, it's not real memory. The same sensory input that creates a real experience, it is real. Yep. I did something with Magic Leap early on. We did a horror test. So we had a very famous film director come by, and we put this thing in a room, and you'd put a system on, and this creature was there, and it tried to eat you, and it was terrifying. Like people ran out screaming. And when it flung itself across the room, it would hit you in the face. And when I did it over and over again, I felt like someone violently punched me. You would actually fall over because your brain had this, like, it was really happening.
It was real.
Yeah, it was real, and I still remember it. So
right,
I'm like,
it's a memory.
Yeah, that was one of those things of like, let's not do that right now. Let's kind of let's pace back. So we were exploring the outer edges of what we should do, and one of the rules I put in place is like we're a GDPG-13 company, that we're going to highly curate what we allow into our content ecosystem.
I remember I think it was you telling me, you or Hank said that one of your early ways of talking about this on content is anything I can't show my grandmother is probably off.
The mom rule.
The mom rule.
Yeah. So at Mako, we came up with the mom rule as, you have to pass all these FDA regulations, quality system regs, but I pull the room together, say, everyone raise their hand if you feel comfortable using this on your mom. And if you don't like your mom, your dad. If you don't like your mom or dad, your brother or sister. Yeah. And if you don't like anyone, you're probably misanthrope. You shouldn't work here. Right. But somebody that you like. But we condense it to the mom rule.
Yeah.
It's like, and then before something would ship, if anyone put their hand down and said, I wouldn't use it on my mom, we wouldn't ship. And we would delay things. And I had to stand in front of the board and get hit by the train saying we didn't pass the mom rule. Even though we passed all these things, somebody on the team who's deep in it said, I wouldn't use it on my mom yet, and we waited. So the first time we ever did something on a real person, everyone raised their hand and said they would use it on their mom. And the incredible thing is our head of software, his mom was one of our first patients.
Wow.
And when we went into surgery and the system worked on her, he was 100% confident it was the right thing to do, and it worked amazing. And then we've done moms and dads and brothers and sisters. I brought my grandfather to see Dr. Roche about a Makoplasty. He didn't need it in the end. But it was sort of like we felt good because we had that rule. So my version of the rule at Magic Leap is like, whatever you do here, whatever you want to build on the system, imagine your mom using it. Imagine your mom seeing whatever you created here.
I think that's
really something
important.
that you'd feel good about? Because most people like, they kind of like check themselves when mom is there or the dad or whatever that figure is, and they become the good person they're supposed to be.
One of the ways when I think about that is Micah. They've created a persona in Magic Leap.
She hasn't met Micah.
No, she hasn't met Micah. Micah is a person that when you put the glasses on, she's there and you interact
like
with her. And it's incredible because you can get right up to her. You can like see the pores in her skin. And she's
No,
real.
but she's responding, makes eye contact, expressions.
But the,
like
the
a
most
human being.
amazing thing is she has her own space. Like if you get up to her, she'll shrug. Like you feel like you're getting into her personal space. And I think this interaction with technology, we sometimes forget that there's a personal space, whether it's, the garbage people say on Twitter and everything else. And I can really see that there's a responsibility with Magic Leap when you're in a person's reality, that you don't violate the space with the kinds of things.
I got to tell you about the most intelligent thing we ever did around Micah. So we were building what we called a human-centered AI. We were going to manifest AI into a digital human being that could have full EQ, be plugged into amazing deep learning and AI backend, and not only visually cross the uncanny valley, which I think Micah's done, like you really believe there's a person, but is aware of the world, has independence, and can interact with you, and then will be smarter than you and become like your teacher, your physicist, a doctor, can play all music, like this sort of new kind of being. And then as we were doing it early on, it was like heading in what I'd call like a Westworld direction. And we stopped that. And we said the people who should be in charge of Micah would not be tech folks, would be creative folks. So we found this woman, Alice Rowe, from the UK. She runs this thing called Herstory, which is like the forgotten history of women, but she calls it Herstory. And she was like the living embodiment of what we wanted Micah to be. So we gave her creative control over Micah. And it's been an amazingly successful thing because like all the mistakes everyone's making with AI, as it's a subordinate thing, it's doing your bidding. Micah does not do your bidding. One of the first things we had Micah do in public was Micah made you into her assistant. And it was very interesting. Like we had like thousands of women meet Micah, and you'd have some of these guys meet Micah, and it took them a few minutes to realize she wasn't going to do stuff for them. She was asking them to do something for her. And it was a way of us introducing to people like AI is a powerful force. It will not only be your peer, it will be a way past you. But you could become friends with an AI. You can actually have a really positive relationship, and it could amplify you, could amplify your capability. But if you treat AI like a subordinate, horrible thing, it'll eventually rebel. Like the first word robot came from a story about a mechanical person. I think it was the early 1900s, where people treated machines like slaves, and they rebelled and they overthrew their masters. And we're in that era where if we do that with AI, it's going to do that to us. But if we treat AI properly, especially if AI begins to look and feel like humans, you don't want to teach people that you could treat that bad. You shouldn't treat them poorly. Treat an AI well, treat people well. Like your manners and respect and your relationships should never go bad.
As you're sharing this, and as I was researching, I was feeling into how magically technology could be used to cultivate compassion. So many of the places that we create conflict in the world, whether it's through war or through interpersonal conflict, is through not being able to feel what someone else feels. And the old saying, if you walk a mile in their shoes, see how you feel. How do you see that it could be used in that way to cultivate compassion of things that are happening to people across the world or in their own neighborhood?
It's an incredibly good use case for us. So one of the ways is to actually Micah is a great platform for that, because you can have what looks like one or more human beings who are highly responsive to you, that can react to you in ways where if you treat someone poorly, that AI trainer could tell you what's going on wrong in a non-embarrassing way. You could teach people social issues like you're not making eye contact, or if you do this, it makes me feel terrible. And by the way, let me show you what it means to feel terrible. And they could do that back to you. Or let me actually spin it around. Now you're inside, like, this is what I feel like. It feels like, and you can actually fill the room with like unhappy faces.
That is so powerful.
You can do some amazing things with that.
That's important. I believe that we should be teaching empathy just like we teach reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Totally.
You need to cultivate empathy. If you look at good leaders today, what makes people empathetic leaders are the same things that make a person not be a bully in the schoolyard. It's this compassion, this awareness of how what you're doing impacts, right? I think we have a responsibility to be more empathetic.
What's interesting is if you think about what you're talking about, guided meditation, as a way to like rewire the brain. Right now in medicine, they largely rewire the brain, either like brutal intervention, like they come and they pull part of your brain out, they shove an electrode in there, which is like, I equate to like if you're fixing the shift key on a laptop in Manhattan, it's like dropping a bomb on the whole city. It's like that's the brute force of surgery. Yeah. Or psychiatry is like just like, putting chemicals on the entire neighborhood to deal with like one issue. But the precision of what's possible with spatial computing and software is if you can guide, if there was a field where you can combine like neuroscience and software to guide neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is how the brain can be changed. And right now we do it through surgery, we do it through chemistry. Software, and you do it through meditation. But software-guided neuroplasticity would be very similar to guided meditation, but it might help people more explicitly move along a path. I think it's definitely a very interesting area. I mean, I think the opportunity in medicine is endless because meditation is a state where you can achieve neuroplasticity and change, and you could probably use spatial computing to get to that state, a meditative state, very quickly as well.
The thing about
Totally
meditation
agree.
also is, like you were saying before we were having our conversation about it, it actually aligns brainwaves, right? It's almost like rebooting a computer. Your brainwaves settle. The thing about meditation is if you do it regularly, it stays with you after the meditation. So the more your mind learns to love being in that state, the more it stays in that state while we're doing our regular stuff, right? And I think, if the ability to accelerate that or the ability to enhance that for people, for me, I always say, man, if you haven't meditated, you're missing out, because that feeling of coming out of meditation and you feel that rebooting. And when I started meditating, it was like maybe it would last half an hour. But now that I've done it for years and I do it twice a day, that feeling stays with you. Molly's there all the time. She never leaves that space. But it's a really powerful thing. And
You do have to watch Doctor Strange, by the way.
I'm totally
she
going to
does.
watch
Because
it.
it's total. I feel like I'm totally in that part of the movie. Because we've externalized like our intellectual function into computing, we realize the hardware matters and there's operating systems and defragging things, and people now understand what that means.
Yeah.
And you realize the best computer in the world is a tiny microfraction of what your brain is, but we pay little attention to the software and maintenance of that.
we have to defrag.
And it's such a much more complicated instrument. Like you could count the number of neurons, it's close to 100 billion. Connections is like 100 trillion. But if you go subneuron into like, let's say quantum functions, it's an almost infinite state of stuff. And if you don't, somehow we don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, nourish it.
But and it's so true. It's like we the thing, as you were saying, Hans, the things we teach children, they don't really. It's gotten to the point where anyone who's doing something in peak performance, whether it's an athlete or a military or a CEO, if you don't have some sort of operating manual of how you're going to calm down and calibrate the mind, I don't know how you stay in it.
Can I tell you
don't
a
know how
peak
you
performance
last.
secret we learned here?
I'd love to hear it.
So martial artists in Japan and China, like as they get to really high levels, I have a friend that's high level, they talk about slowing time down. And we're like, so it was like, that sounds crazy, like some kind of, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee movie thing. But I started to spend time with them because, we study neuroscience in the company. And what they're really doing is think about a high frame rate camera. So if you take in thousands of frames per second, you see everything moving really slowly. And what I've talked to a couple of them, it's like they're really changing the intake into the brain, and they've reshaped how their brain, which means that they're slowing things down for real. But then when you talk about, like, you'd hear about like Ted Williams could see the seams on the baseball. Why was he such a great hitter? Because he had such concentration and focus. He had probably rewired his brain, his visual system, and his frame rate intake that he probably could slow time down. And I have a friend that played in the NFL, and I asked him about it. He's like, how did you figure that out? like probably the peak
call it the
boxer.
zone.
Yeah, but some of them like hyper specialize. And what they do is they probably do something really interesting where they are like, you would call it like the change of space-time intake of the brain. But if you think of it from a tech perspective, they're changing the frame rate intake. They're changing the peripheral view. They're reformatting what their brain does, which gives them kind of superpowers.
Yes.
I have a guy in the company, I won't say who sees infrared spectrum.
Really?
He works in one of our labs, which is pitch black. We're walking, he's like, I have IR vision. I'm like, what in the heck? Like,
that is
I'm
crazy.
like in a pitch black, like we have this thing like a completely black room with a super.
He can see.
He sees the infrared spectrum because that's what and I'm like, that's amazing. You're like an X-Men mutant.
Yeah.
But like it's, you see these edge cases of like some people have take their brain to this peak performance. So some of these like edge stories are not. They're not only not fake, they're grounded in some physics and neuroscience too.
Totally. And in Sanskrit, they're called the Kanchukas. It's like it's the edge of the cliff is between time and timelessness, form and the formless, this imperfect state of being versus the perfect state of being, the place where we need to know everything versus the place where there's nothing to know because it's inherently perfect. And that threshold is exactly it. And when you learn to dance on that cliff, you can spill over into those other places. And it's so powerful to see. And I'm so excited about what you're doing because it's something that can change the way people think and operate. So
we're going to wrap it up here.
I think our Zen space just got invaded.
Rony's being called out. But room, car, or desk, what do you clean first?
None.
What do most people not know about you?
That I used to throw javelin.
Favorite sound?
Ooh, rock and roll.
Rock and roll. I agree with you on that. Best invention ever?
Ooh, I don't think I could talk about that here.
All right. Last one. Who'd you like to be stuck in a room with?
Oh, wow. John Lennon?
Amen, brother.
All right.
Thank you, Rony.
Our podcast, Conversations Matter, is produced by Amalia Briggs. Our sound engineer is Matthew Tucker, and our amazing sponsor is the Great Courses Plus. Thank you. We couldn't do it without you.